You know them. We all do. That one coworker who confidently steers every meeting toward a dead end with their ill-conceived plans. The relative at a dinner party who, after a single documentary, morphs into a world-renowned expert on quantum physics. The anonymous internet commenter, armed with a keyboard and absolute certainty, who fearlessly argues with seasoned professionals. What is the source of this strange and captivating chasm between a person's confidence and their actual competence? The key lies within a profound psychological principle unearthed more than 20 years ago. In 1999, social psychologists David Dunning and Dunning-Kruger unveiled a landmark study that would permanently alter our view of human thought. Their work pinpointed a cognitive bias that now carries their names: the Dunning-Kruger effect. This phenomenon elegantly explains why individuals with the least amount of skill in a particular area are often the ones who wildly overestimate their own capabilities, while those with genuine expertise frequently do the opposite, underestimating their talents. As David Dunning himself famously quipped, "The first rule of the Dunning-Kruger Club is you don't know you're a member of the Dunning-Kruger Club." Today, we journey deep into this psychological paradox that, to some extent, touches every one of us. We will uncover its bizarre origins, dissect its inner workings, explore vivid real-world examples, and, most critically, learn how to spot and counter it in ourselves. Because the ultimate irony of the Dunning-Kruger effect is that those most ensnared by it are the least equipped to ever realize it. The man who was invisible to cameras. The discovery of the Dunning-Kruger effect was sparked by a crime almost too absurd to be true. In 1995, a man named MacArthur Wheeler strode into two Pittsburgh banks under the full glare of the midday sun. With no mask or disguise, he robbed them both and calmly walked out. When he was arrested later that same night, Wheeler was in a state of genuine disbelief, stunned to discover that security cameras had perfectly captured his face. "But I wore the juice," he protested to the baffled detectives. Wheeler had coated his face in lemon juice. His logic was bizarrely simple. Since lemon juice can be used as invisible ink, he believed it would render his face invisible to surveillance cameras. This extraordinary display of misplaced confidence captivated psychologist David Dunning. He was fascinated by Wheeler's absolute faith in a completely flawed premise. It drove Dunning to ask a fundamental question: how could a person be so incompetent that they are blind to their own incompetence? He joined forces with Dunning-Kruger, a promising graduate student at the time, to systematically investigate this puzzle. In their groundbreaking study, published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, Dunning and Kruger tested participants' abilities in humor, grammar, and logical reasoning. Following the tests, each participant was asked to rank their own performance against the other participants. The findings were both startling and consistent. Individuals who scored in the bottom 25% grotesquely overestimated their abilities. They imagined they had outperformed 62% of their peers, when in reality, they had only surpassed 12%. Conversely, the top performers consistently underestimated where they stood. As Dunning later articulated, "If you're incompetent, you can't know you're incompetent. The skills you need to produce a right answer are exactly the skills you need to recognize what a right answer is." This insight revealed the double burden of incompetence. Not only does a person lack the skills to perform effectively, but they also lack the metacognitive tools to even recognize their own shortcomings. The mechanics of a blind mind. At its heart, the Dunning-Kruger effect is born from a failure in metacognition, the inability to step back and accurately judge one's own knowledge and skill. This mental blind spot erects an illusion of superiority that is incredibly resistant to facts and evidence. This illusion is powered by several psychological engines. First, there's the problem of unknown unknowns. When we step into a new field, we are oblivious to the sheer scale of the knowledge required. We literally don't know what we don't know. As Dunning explains, the abilities needed to generate a correct answer are the very same abilities needed to judge if an answer is correct. If you lack expertise, you also lack the capacity to recognize expertise, including its absence in yourself. Second is our old friend, confirmation bias. Once our mind decides we are skilled, it begins to act like a biased lawyer, selectively gathering evidence that supports this belief and dismissing anything that contradicts it. A novice who feels like an expert will vividly recall their few successes, blame their many failures on bad luck or external factors, and interpret any vague feedback in the most positive light possible. Third is the inherent difficulty of calibrating our self-worth. Even when we try to be objective, human beings are terrible at evaluating themselves in a vacuum. Without clear benchmarks or direct feedback, we have a powerful tendency to see ourselves as above average, a well-documented phenomenon known as illusory superiority. The philosopher Bertrand Russell perfectly captured this dynamic. The whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, but wiser people so full of doubts. This timeless observation gets to the very core of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where at the far ends of the knowledge spectrum, confidence and competence seem to be in a perfect inverse relationship. From Mount Stupid to the plateau of sustainability. While pop culture often paints the Dunning-Kruger effect as a simple, stupid people are confident graph, the true relationship is far more fascinating and nuanced. Researchers have mapped out a journey of learning, a curve that traces our path from utter novice to true expert. The journey often begins at a place some have colorfully dubbed Mount Stupid. This is the treacherous summit of overconfidence, reached by beginners who have learned just enough to feel knowledgeable but are completely unaware of the vast, unexplored territory of their own ignorance. As Mark Twain is often credited with saying, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so." After this initial peak, the learner descends into the valley of despair. This is the moment when continued learning finally reveals the true, intimidating scope of the subject. Confidence plummets. This is a critical breaking point where many simply give up, unable to square their former self-image with the humbling new reality of their limitations. But for those who persevere, the slow, deliberate ascent up the slope of enlightenment begins. Here, competence and confidence grow together, hand in hand, fueled by dedicated practice and a hunger to learn. Eventually, they can reach the plateau of sustainability, where high competence is finally paired with a well-earned, realistic confidence. What's truly fascinating is that genuine experts often display a slight underconfidence. This expert's uncertainty doesn't come from weakness, but from a deep, comprehensive grasp of their field's complexity. They are acutely aware of the boundaries of their knowledge and can see the vast ocean of what remains unknown. As the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman once said, "I think it's much more interesting to live not knowing than to have answers that might be wrong." This profound intellectual humility is the ultimate hallmark of expertise, a world away from the brash certainty of the novice, the effect in the wild. While much of the evidence for the Dunning-Kruger effect was born in labs and academic tests, the phenomenon breaks free of these walls, permeating almost every aspect of our lives. Step into any office, and you'll likely find it. The unskilled and unaware employee who consistently overrates their own performance, blissfully ignorant of the problems they cause. One study famously found that 95% of managers rated their performance as being in the top 50% of their peers, a statistical impossibility. This inflated self-view leads directly to a resistance to feedback, stunted professional growth, and needless conflict. In healthcare, the stakes become a matter of life and death. Medical students with the lowest demonstrated skills often rate their clinical abilities the highest. A dangerous cocktail that can lead to deadly overconfidence in diagnoses and treatments. One study revealed that the doctors most confident in their diagnoses were no more accurate than their less confident peers, but they were significantly less likely to consult others or double-check their facts. In the political arena, the effect helps explain why the loudest and most passionate voices on complex policy issues often possess the most superficial understanding. Those with only a rudimentary grasp of economics, climate science, or foreign relations can express absolute, unshakable certainty, while the actual experts in these fields are the first to admit the inherent limitations and complexities involved. And, in our modern digital world, the Dunning-Kruger effect has found its most fertile breeding ground. Social media platforms hand a digital megaphone to every individual, allowing those with zero expertise to broadcast their opinions with the same apparent authority as Nobel laureates. This democratization of voice, while valuable, has also sparked what some call an expertise crisis, where the line between a novice opinion and an expert fact becomes dangerously blurred. As astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson puts it, one of the great challenges in this world is knowing enough about a subject to think you're right, but not enough about the subject to know you're wrong. This perfectly captures how the effect operates out in the wild, shaping our world in ways we are only beginning to understand. Does culture play a role? The expression of the Dunning-Kruger effect is not the same everywhere. It is shaded and shaped by the culture we live in. In many Western cultures, particularly in the United States, the cultural script often rewards bold self-assurance and confident self-promotion. Children are encouraged to believe in themselves, which can create fertile ground for overestimation. The American ethos of rugged individualism may inadvertently amplify the Dunning-Kruger effect by promoting positive self-talk, sometimes at the expense of objective reality. In stark contrast, many East Asian cultures place a high value on humility, continuous self-improvement, and a keen awareness of one's own limitations. Studies have shown that Japanese students, for instance, tend to rate themselves as below average on many skills, the polar opposite of the above-average effect seen in the West. This cultural default towards self-criticism may act as a natural buffer against the Dunning-Kruger effect. Societies that are more collectivist, where group harmony is prized over individual ego, also show different patterns. In these cultures, individuals may be more attuned to feedback from their peers and less likely to cling to an inflated self-assessment that goes against the group consensus. As the ancient philosopher Confucius wisely noted, real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance. Cultures that weave this philosophy into their social fabric may naturally foster the metacognitive skills needed to keep the Dunning-Kruger effect in check. However, no culture is entirely immune. The fundamental human limitation of not knowing what you don't know is a universal challenge, even if it wears different cultural clothing from one society to the next. The crucial difference between confidence and overconfidence. While the Dunning-Kruger effect paints a cautionary tale about overconfidence, it's vital to understand that confidence itself is not the enemy. In fact, a healthy dose of self-belief is the fuel for motivation, perseverance, and ultimately, achievement. The problem arises when confidence becomes dangerously detached from reality. This misalignment is what leads to disastrous decisions, a stubborn refusal to learn, and fractured relationships. Healthy, appropriate confidence, on the other hand, is a powerful ally. Research in performance psychology consistently shows that peak performance is achieved in a sweet spot of calibrated confidence. Enough belief to push you to act, but not so much that you become blind to your own errors. Interestingly, some studies suggest that a slight overestimation of one's abilities might even be beneficial. This mild positive illusion can act as a motivational booster, helping us tackle daunting challenges and persist through early setbacks. The crucial difference is the degree. We're talking about the slight overconfidence that fuels effort, not the dramatic, unfounded certainty that defines the Dunning-Kruger effect. As psychologist Albert Bandura explained, people with a strong sense of self-efficacy bounce back from failures. They approach things in terms of how to handle them rather than worrying about what can go wrong. This resilient, healthy confidence is fundamentally different from the brittle certainty of someone trapped by the Dunning-Kruger effect. The true challenge, then, isn't to crush our confidence, but to cultivate it in direct proportion to our actual abilities, to develop what is known as epistemic humility right alongside our self-belief. It's a delicate balance between acknowledging our capabilities and honoring our limitations. How to escape the trap? Perhaps the most daunting aspect of the Dunning-Kruger effect is trying to spot it in the mirror. By its very nature, the bias works to conceal itself from us, creating a stubborn cognitive blind spot. So, how do we break free? The first step is a dose of humility, accepting that we are all vulnerable. No one, regardless of their IQ or education, is immune to overestimating their skills in areas where they are not an expert. As intellectual historian Robert Burton warns, the feeling of knowing is not a reliable guide to whether or not you actually know something. Here are practical strategies to counteract the effect. First, actively seek out trusted critics. We must find people with genuine expertise and ask for their honest, unvarnished feedback. This provides the objective yardstick that our own self-assessment so often lacks. It requires true openness and the courage to set aside our defensive instincts. Second, engage in deliberate practice with a clear feedback loop. Simply repeating a task isn't enough. In fact, it can reinforce overconfidence. We need to practice with a specific focus on our weak spots and receive immediate, clear feedback on how we're doing. This is how we recalibrate our internal sense of competence. Third, cultivate metacognitive awareness. This means learning to think about your thinking. Make it a habit to pause and reflect on the limits of your knowledge. Actively consider opposing viewpoints and question your initial gut reactions and feelings of certainty. As Socrates famously declared, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. And finally, perhaps the most powerful antidote of all, is to get comfortable with uncertainty. We live in a world that rewards quick, confident answers. Resisting this pressure to always know requires real intellectual courage. The courage to say the words, "I don't know," or I'm not sure. As the writer Aldous Huxley observed, that men do not learn very much from the lessons of history is the most important of all the lessons that history has to teach. In the same vein, the most vital lesson from the Dunning-Kruger effect may be to learn to doubt ourselves, especially when we feel the most certain. The Dunning-Kruger effect on steroids. The digital age. Our modern information landscape has been radically reshaped, adding new and dangerous dimensions to the Dunning-Kruger effect. The internet gives us the power to gain a surface-level familiarity with any topic imaginable in a matter of seconds. But this easy access to facts can create a potent illusion of understanding, amplifying the effect. The very architecture of social media platforms makes the problem worse. Algorithms are designed to promote content that sparks high engagement, which often means rewarding loud, absolute, and unequivocal statements over careful, qualified, and nuanced analysis. This digital stage ensures the most confident voices are often the most prominent, regardless of their actual expertise. Our personalized filter bubbles and echo chambers then seal us off from dissenting information that might challenge our newfound expertise. When you're only surrounded by voices that agree with you, the opportunity to recognize your own limitations evaporates. The sheer tsunami of information online also leads to what researchers call knowledge fragmentation. We collect disconnected facts like puzzle pieces, but lack the conceptual framework, the picture on the box, to fit them together into a meaningful whole. This creates the sensation of understanding without the substance. As author Tom Nichols writes in The Death of Expertise, the internet can also give us the false impression that our views are more widely shared and more correct than they actually are. The solution is not to unplug from the modern world, but to navigate it with a heightened sense of metacognitive awareness. This means remembering that reading an online article does not make you an epidemiologist. It means understanding the vast difference between having access to information and truly comprehending a complex system. It means honing our digital literacy to distinguish credible sources from confident charlatans. As the writer Maria Popova beautifully states, critical thinking without hope is cynicism, but hope without critical thinking is naivete. That balanced perspective is our essential guide for acquiring knowledge in the digital age. The ripple effect, societal consequences. While the Dunning-Kruger effect is a bias that lives inside the individual mind, its cumulative impact can warp societies, cripple institutions, and degrade public discourse. Recognizing these broader implications reveals the effect not just as a psychological quirk, but as a potent social force. In democratic societies, the effect can distort the very fabric of our elections. When voters with a shallow understanding of policy feel supremely confident in judging complex proposals, it opens the door to simplistic solutions for multifaceted problems and makes the public vulnerable to populist rhetoric that offers easy certainty instead of hard nuance. Within organizations, the effect can poison hiring and promotion. When candidates with immense confidence but limited skill outshine more capable but modest individuals, it can lead to what's known as confidence cascades. Entire company cultures can begin to value the performance of certainty over the reality of performance. In public health and science communication, the effect creates a wall of resistance against expert guidance. This was thrown into sharp relief during the COVID-19 pandemic, where confident non-experts frequently and passionately challenged public health consensus based on a fragmented understanding of virology and epidemiology. This dynamic also undermines our educational systems, particularly when strong-willed individuals with little pedagogical knowledge advocate for educational policies that fly in the face of evidence-based practices, threatening teacher authority and student outcomes. The words of philosopher Hannah Arendt ring with a chilling relevance. The ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not the convinced Nazi or the convinced communist, but people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction, true and false, no longer exists. While less dramatic, the slow erosion of our respect for expertise, amplified by the Dunning-Kruger effect, creates a similar vulnerability in all societies. Tackling these societal challenges requires more than just individual self-improvement. It demands institutional reforms that learn to distinguish between confidence and competence, that reward intellectual humility, and that build better bridges for communicating specialized knowledge to the public. The paradox of wisdom. The journey through the Dunning-Kruger effect leaves us with a fundamental paradox of human knowledge. The more we truly learn, the more we become aware of how much we don't know. As our circle of knowledge grows, so too does its circumference, the border where it touches the vast, dark expanse of the unknown. This paradox is what creates the counterintuitive path we've explored, from the unearned confidence of the novice to the calibrated humility of the expert. It explains why genuine mastery is so often marked not by absolute certainty, but by a comfort with complexity, nuance, and the known limits of one's understanding. Understanding the Dunning-Kruger effect is more than just learning about a cognitive bias. It is a powerful tool for self-reflection and intellectual growth. It is a reminder that the road to genuine knowledge is paved with the recognition of our own limitations. It encourages us to find both the confidence to act and the humility to constantly learn. As we navigate a world overflowing with confident voices selling simple answers, awareness of this bias is more critical than ever. It is the filter that helps us distinguish hollow certainty from hard-won expertise, both in the world around us and, most importantly, within ourselves. Perhaps the greatest gift of understanding this effect is that it inspires a more compassionate view of human fallibility. When we see that overconfidence often springs not from arrogance, but from the very nature of how we acquire knowledge, we can approach disagreements with more patience and intellectual grace. In the words of the brilliant physicist Richard Feynman, "I believe that a scientist looking at non-scientific problems is just as dumb as the next guy." That profound humility, from one of the greatest minds in history, perfectly encapsulates the lesson of the Dunning-Kruger effect. That true wisdom begins not with the feeling of knowing, but with the courageous admission of how much we have yet to learn. By embracing this paradox, that knowledge reveals ignorance, and that understanding unveils complexity. We open ourselves to a lifetime of deeper learning and a more honest relationship between our confidence and our competence. And in doing so, we take the most important step in disarming the very bias we've explored today.